She was supposed to clean the room, not read the contract. He was seconds away from signing his own downfall. One sentence hidden in fine print changed everything. Before sunrise, a maid would challenge a billionaire's empire. The study was always the quietest room in the penthouse. Ava Monroe preferred it that way. While the rest of the apartment pulsed with silent power, glass walls overlooking Manhattan, security cameras blinking red like watchful eyes, the faint hum of servers hidden behind reinforced doors. The study felt suspended in time. Heavy mahogany shelves climbed from floor to ceiling, lined with leather-bound volumes no one ever read. The desk at the center was massive, hand-carved, polished to a mirror shine. It wasn't a place meant for comfort. It was a place where decisions were made, decisions that ruin lives. Ava wiped the surface carefully, her movements practiced, precise. No wasted motion. No sound. She had learned early that in Dominic Kane's home, invisibility was survival. At 29, Ava was strikingly beautiful, though no one here ever commented on it. Smooth dark skin, sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a quiet dignity that didn't belong in a maid's uniform. She wore the role well, head down, voice soft, presence forgettable. That was the point. She was not supposed to be noticed. The contract lay open on the desk. She hadn't meant to read it. At least, that was the lie she told herself. The truth was simpler and far more dangerous. She couldn't not read it. Her eyes caught the words the way a musician caught a wrong note. Instantly. Instinctively. The bold heading at the top of the page made her fingers tighten around the cloth. Asset transfer and liability shield agreement. Her heartbeat slowed, not from calm but from training. Ava glanced toward the door. The hallway was empty. Dominic Kane was still out. His driver had said he wouldn't return for another hour. She had time. She leaned in just enough to read. Clause after clause scrolled past her eyes, dense legal language wrapped in deliberate ambiguity. The kind of writing designed to exhaust scrutiny. The kind meant to slip past arrogant men who believed money bought immunity. Then she saw it. Her breath caught. Clause 17.4. The world narrowed to a single paragraph. It was there, hidden exactly where it always was. Buried beneath harmless indemnity language, disguised as protection, framed as routine. An irrevocable assumption of criminal liability clause. Ava felt the blood drain from her face. "No," she whispered. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from memory. She had seen this clause before. Not similar. Not close. The same structure. The same wording. The same deadly elegance. A clause that transferred all future criminal exposure to the signing party while shielding every other entity involved: consultants, legal firms, subsidiaries, shell companies. A legal guillotine disguised as a silk tie. If Dominic Kane signed this contract, he wouldn't just lose money. He would become expendable. The fall guy. The one name prosecutors would circle when the time came. Ava straightened slowly, her chest tight. She had promised herself she would never do this again. Never get involved. Never warn. Never speak. Because the last time she did, it destroyed her life. 5 years earlier, Ava Monroe had stood in a glass conference room on the 43rd floor of Whitmore and Sloan LLP, her voice steady despite the tension coiling in her stomach. "I'm telling you," she had said, tapping the document projected on the screen. "This clause creates unilateral criminal exposure. It violates public policy and, if challenged, will collapse the entire agreement." The room had gone silent. Senior partners exchanged glances. The client's representative frowned. Eleanor Whitmore, the firm's founding partner, had smiled thinly. "You're overreaching, Ava," Eleanor said. "This clause has been vetted." "No, it hasn't," Ava replied. "It's intentionally structured to bypass judicial scrutiny. If anything goes wrong, anything, the signer absorbs all liability. It's predatory." That was the moment everything changed. The meeting ended early. 2 weeks later, an anonymous complaint accused Ava of ethical misconduct. 3 months later, her license was suspended pending investigation. 6 months later, no firm in New York would return her calls. Behind closed doors, the same partners she had worked beside for years whispered her name like a warning. Troublemaker. Unreliable. Not a team player. The clause went unchallenged. The deal went through, and Ava Monroe was erased. Back in the study, Ava closed her eyes. She was not that woman anymore. She was a maid now. A ghost. She had changed her name. Taken cash-only jobs. Learned when to speak and when silence was safer. Dominic Kane's house was just another stop on that road of disappearance. Except it wasn't, because Dominic Kane wasn't just a billionaire. He was whispered about in courtrooms and police precincts. A man whose wealth was clean on paper and lethal underneath. A man whose name never appeared where it should, and always appeared where it mattered. If this clause existed in his contract, it meant something worse. Someone was setting him up. Ava wiped her hands on her apron, breathing slowly. Not my problem, she told herself. Not again. She gathered the papers to stack them neatly, the way she always did. That was when the elevator chimed. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, measured, confident, unhurried. Dominic Kane had returned. Ava turned just as he entered the study. He filled the doorway effortlessly. 35, tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her annual wages. His presence bent the air around him, the way predators seem to quiet a room without trying. His cold gray eyes flicked to her. "You're still here," he said. "Yes, sir," Ava replied, lowering her gaze. His attention shifted to the desk. The open contract. He frowned. "You moved my papers." "I was cleaning, sir." He stepped closer, picked up the document, flipping to the final page. His pen was already in his hand. Ava's pulse roared in her ears. This was it. The moment. If she stayed silent, she would be safe. If she spoke, everything could collapse again. Dominic uncapped the pen. Ava inhaled. "Sir," she said softly, before she could stop herself. The pen paused midair. Dominic's eyes snapped to her. "What did you say?" The room seemed to shrink. Ava's throat tightened, but she held her ground. I think you should review that contract more carefully." Silence slammed down like a weapon. Dominic turned slowly, his expression darkening. "Did you just interrupt me?" Ava swallowed. "Yes, sir." He laughed once. Not amused. "You're a maid," he said flatly. "You clean. You don't think. You don't speak when I'm conducting business." She met his gaze now. "I understand," she said. "But that clause." He slammed the document onto the desk. "Enough." His voice was quiet. "That was worse. What gives you the audacity," he continued, stepping closer, "to interfere in my personal affairs?" Ava's hands trembled, but her voice did not. "That contract will destroy you," she said. The words hung between them. For a moment, Dominic simply stared at her, as if trying to decide whether she was brave or suicidal. Then his jaw tightened. "Get out," he said. "Now." She didn't move. "Sir." "I said get out." Ava exhaled shakily. "If you sign it," she said, "you will assume full criminal liability for every entity involved. When federal prosecutors come, and they will, you'll be the only name left standing." The fury in his eyes burned cold. "You have 10 seconds, Dominic said, "to explain how a maid understands federal contract law, or you leave this building permanently." Ava closed her eyes. There was no going back now. "I'm a lawyer," she said. The room went still. Dominic laughed again, but this time there was no humor at all. "You expect me to believe that?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded document. Her bar identification. Expired. Suspended. But real. He took it slowly, eyes scanning the name. Ava Monroe. His gaze lifted. "You were banned," he said. "Yes." "Why?" She looked at the contract on his desk. "Because I pointed out that clause." Silence swallowed the room. For the first time since she had met him, Dominic Kane looked uncertain. And for the first time in years, Ava Monroe felt seen. The silence after Ava's confession stretched until it felt alive. Dominic Kane stood motionless, the the bar identification card still between his fingers. His eyes flicked from the card to Ava's face, searching, not for truth, but for cracks. Lies always had them. A twitch, a hesitation, a need to explain too much. Ava gave him none. She stood straight, hands folded in front of her apron, her expression calm in the way only someone who had already lost everything could be calm. "A lawyer," Dominic repeated slowly. "In my house?" "Yes, sir." "Cleaning my desk?" "Yes." "Reading my contracts?" She nodded once. "I couldn't help it." Something unreadable crossed his face. Amusement, maybe. Or calculation. He walked past her, circling the desk, setting the card down with deliberate care. He picked up the contract again, flipped to clause 17.4, and read it in silence. When he finished, he looked at her. "Explain," he said. Ava exhaled. This was the part she'd rehearsed in nightmares. "That clause is structured to trigger only after execution," she began. "It won't raise flags during due diligence because it's buried beneath indemnification language. But once activated, it transfers criminal exposure exclusively to the signing party." Dominic leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "You're saying my lawyers missed that?" "They didn't miss it," Ava replied. "They approved it." His jaw tightened. "Why?" "Because they're not your lawyers," she said. "They're legal buffers. Their job isn't to protect you. It's to protect everyone else." The room hummed faintly, the city below, the quiet machinery of wealth and secrecy. Dominic gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." Ava hesitated. That wasn't a suggestion. She sat. "Start from the beginning," he said. "And don't spare details. I don't reward half-truths." Ava folded her hands in her lap. Her fingers trembled once, then stilled. "I was a junior associate at Whitmore and Sloan," she said. "Corporate litigation. Mergers, acquisitions, risk management. I specialized in contract review." She swallowed. The firm represented a logistics conglomerate. On paper, clean. In reality, money laundering, shell companies, offshore accounts. "I noticed the clause during a routine review." Dominic's eyes sharpened. "The same clause?" "Yes." "What did you do?" "I flagged it. Quietly. Professionally." Her voice softened. "I thought they'd thank me." A bitter smile touched her lips. "Instead, the partner I reported to told me I was overreaching. That I didn't understand the client's needs." "And you pushed anyway?" "Yes." Dominic nodded once. "That's usually where people die." Ava met his gaze. "They chose something worse." She told him everything. How the firm delayed her cases. How her access was slowly revoked. How whispers began to follow her down hallways. Then came the complaint, anonymous, detailed, devastating. Allegations of conflict of interest. Ethical violations she couldn't disprove because the evidence had been sealed. "They controlled the narrative," she said. And the bar listened. "What about appeals?" "I tried. For 2 years." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "Every door was closed before I reached it." Dominic was silent. "And then?" he asked. "I became radioactive," Ava said. "No firm would touch me. Not even pro bono clinics. I sold my apartment. Took cash jobs. Changed my name." She looked down at her uniform. This was supposed to be temporary. Dominic studied her for a long moment. "Why my house?" he asked. Ava hesitated. "Because your security team uses private contractors. No background checks deep enough to find me. And because," he added, "you knew who I was." "Yes." "Why stay?" "Because I needed to disappear," she said. "And because people like you don't like questions." A corner of his mouth twitched. "Smart woman." He straightened, pacing now, energy coiling in his movements. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that the same people who destroyed your career are trying to bury me under a mountain of indictments." "Yes." "And you decided to warn me." "Yes." "Why?" Ava looked up. "Because I know what it feels like to watch your future collapse in silence." The words landed harder than any accusation. Dominic stopped pacing. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he picked up the phone on his desk. "Cancel the signing," he said calmly. And get me every contract we've executed in the last 10 years. I want originals. He hung up and turned back to Ava. You're not a maid anymore, he said. Her heart skipped. Sir, you're my problem now. That wasn't comfort. That was a promise. By midnight, the study was buried in paper. Contracts, addendums, side letters, each one a potential noose. Dominic sat behind the desk, sleeves rolled up, eyes burning with focus. Ava stood beside him, pointing, annotating, dismantling documents line by line. Here, she said, tapping a paragraph. This triggers deferred liability. And this, shell exposure, designed to collapse inward. How many? He asked. She hesitated. Too many. Dominic exhaled slowly. For years, he said, I've paid the best legal minds money can buy. They weren't yours, Ava replied. They were assigned. He glanced at her. Assigned by who? That's what we need to find out. A notification buzzed on his phone. He glanced at it, then cursed softly. They're already moving, he said. Who? The U.S. Attorney's Office. Quiet subpoenas. Financial records. He looked at her sharply. They expected me to sign tonight. Ava's pulse spiked. Then they're accelerating. Yes. He leaned back, studying her as if seeing her for the first time. You just bought me time, he said. Now tell me how to use it. Ava inhaled. We flipped the script, she said. We exposed the clause. Not as criminal protection, but as criminal engineering. Dominic's eyes lit with something dangerous. Go on. We leak selectively, she said. Anonymous tips. Documents that force regulators to look at the firms, not you. And my past contracts. We reframe them. You cooperate strategically. A beat. State witness, he asked. Insurance, Ava corrected. You don't fall alone. Dominic laughed softly. You really are a lawyer. She allowed herself a small smile. Days passed in a blur. Ava no longer wore the uniform. Dominic moved her into a secure guest suite. Gave her access to encrypted files. Brought in independent analysts. People he trusted because they had nothing to gain. Every night they worked. Every morning, the news grew louder. Investigations. Whispers. Names surfacing. Whitmore and Sloan appeared in an article, buried but present. Ava stared at the screen longer than she meant to. You okay? Dominic asked. They're bleeding, she said quietly. Finally. Not enough, he replied. I want the artery. A knock interrupted them. Dominic's head of security entered, face tight. Sir, he said. Federal agents are asking questions downstairs. Dominic stood. Ava's breath caught. He looked at her. They won't take me, he said. Not yet. She nodded. And you, he continued, are done hiding. What do you mean? I'm putting you on record, he said. Quietly. As my legal consultant. Her eyes widened. That puts a target on me. It also puts my name between you and everyone else, he said. Anyone who touches you touches me. Ava held his gaze. This man, dangerous, ruthless, was offering her something no one else ever had. Protection. Why? She asked. Dominic's voice softened just slightly. Because they erased you, he said. And I don't like thieves. That night, Ava stood alone on the balcony, city lights stretching endlessly before her. For years, she had survived by shrinking. Now the world was expanding again, terrifying and bright. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She answered. Ava Monroe, a male voice asked. Yes. This is Marcus Reed, he said. Investigative journalist. I think we need to talk about a law firm that ruined your life. Ava closed her eyes. The past wasn't done with her. But this time she wasn't alone. Inside, Dominic Kane watched from the shadows, already planning the war to come. The first hearing took place on a Tuesday morning, beneath fluorescent lights that hummed like insects. Ava Monroe sat at the long oak table, hands folded, spine straight, her name printed neatly on a placard in front of her. It felt unreal, seeing it there, spelled correctly publicly. For years, her name had existed only in sealed records and whispered warnings. Now it was back in the open. Across the room, Attorneys murmured nervously. Federal prosecutors shuffled files. Reporters filled the gallery, pens poised, eyes hungry. And somewhere beyond the courthouse walls, the old system was panicking. Marcus Reed sat 2 seats behind Ava, laptop open, fingers flying. He had moved fast, faster than anyone expected. Within days of their first conversation, he had traced the claws across multiple cases, multiple firms, multiple collapsed careers. A pattern. A conspiracy. "Ms. Monroe," the committee chair said, adjusting his glasses. "You may proceed." Ava stood. For a heartbeat, the room blurred. She remembered the first time she'd stood in a courtroom. Young, confident, believing the law was a shield. She believed it again now. "This clause," she began, her voice clear, "is not a mistake. It is a mechanism, designed to isolate criminal liability onto a single individual while immunizing every other participant." She paused, letting the words land. "It weaponizes trust." Screens lit up around the room. Documents appeared, contracts, highlights, annotations. Ava walked them through each one, dismantling the language with surgical precision. "This paragraph," she said, pointing, "appears neutral. But combined with the deferred enforcement trigger in subsection C, it becomes retroactive." Murmurs rippled through the room. "Ms. Monroe," a prosecutor interrupted, "are you alleging intentional misconduct by licensed attorneys?" "Yes," Ava replied without hesitation. "I am alleging systemic misconduct." Silence. Then pens began to scratch. 3 weeks later, Whitmore and Sloan LLP shut down its corporate wing. 2 senior partners resigned for personal reasons. A third was indicted. The news cycle exploded. Headlines blared. Predatory contracts under federal scrutiny. Law firms accused of engineering legal fall guys. Disbarred lawyer at center of expose. Ava watched the coverage from Dominic Kane's penthouse, the television muted. Dominic stood beside her, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "You okay?" he asked. "They're finally saying it out loud," she replied. "But they're not saying my name right." "They will," he said. He'd kept his end of the bargain. When federal agents came again, Dominic didn't run. He didn't threaten. He didn't bribe. He cooperated. Strategically. He handed over documents, carefully curated, devastating in their clarity. Names higher up the food chain. Architects, not puppets. The kind of people who believed they were untouchable because they never signed anything themselves. In exchange, prosecutors delayed charges. The deal was fragile. Temporary. But it held. The letter arrived on a rainy afternoon. Ava stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. State Bar of New York. Her hands trembled as she read. After review of newly submitted evidence. Disciplinary action imposed in error. Full reinstatement effective immediately. The words blurred. She sank onto the couch, breath leaving her in a shaky laugh that turned into tears she hadn't allowed herself in years. Dominic knelt in front of her, resting his forearms on his knees. "It's over," he said quietly. "No," Ava replied, wiping her face. "It's beginning." 6 months later, Ava Monroe stood in her own office. The sign on the door read, "Monroe Legal Strategies, Corporate Accountability and Risk Defense." The space was modest but elegant. Clean lines. Warm light. Walls lined with books she had once believed she'd never touch again. Marcus leaned against the doorway. "You know they're calling you the woman who cracked the claws, right?" Ava smiled faintly. "I hate that. You love that." She laughed. Her phone buzzed. Dominic Kane. She hesitated, then answered. "I hear congratulations are in order," he said. "They reinstated my license," she replied. "Officially. I never doubted it." "That's not true," she said gently. He chuckled. "Fair." A pause. "I need a lawyer," Dominic said. Ava raised an eyebrow. "You have about 10. I need one who tells me when I'm about to ruin myself." She leaned back in her chair, considering. "This is not employment," she said. "And I don't work in the shadows." "I wouldn't insult you by asking," he replied. "This is on record. Clean." She smiled. "Then make an appointment," she said. When Dominic Kane walked into her office weeks later, he wasn't the feared billionaire mafia boss everyone whispered about. He was a client. He sat across from her desk, composed, respectful. "You know," he said, "if you hadn't spoken that night—" "I know," Ava interrupted. "That's why I did." He studied her for a long moment. "They tried to erase you," he said. "Instead, you rewrote the rules." Ava met his gaze, steady and unafraid. "They underestimated a maid," she replied. "That was their first mistake." Outside, the city moved on, indifferent, relentless. Inside, a woman reclaimed everything they tried to take. Not with revenge, with the law. 1 year later, the courtroom was quieter than Ava remembered. Not because fewer people were present, but because everyone inside understood exactly what was at stake. Ava Monroe sat at the counsel table, legal pad open, pen resting between her fingers. She no longer felt the old tremor when the judge entered. No rush of nerves. No tightening in her chest. She belonged here. Across the aisle, a young attorney stood rigid, face pale. He was bright, top of his class, excellent resume. And terrified. The kind of fear Ava recognized instantly. The kind that came from realizing too late that someone above you had lied. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Counsel, are you prepared to address the court regarding the liability transfer provision?" The young attorney hesitated. Ava stood. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "before counsel responds, the defense would like to submit supplemental authority." She approached the bench and handed over a slim folder. The judge flipped through it once, then twice. His expression hardened. "This clause," the judge said slowly, "has already been ruled unenforceable in 3 federal circuits." Murmurs rippled through the room. The young attorney's shoulders sagged. The judge looked up. "Motion denied. And this court strongly advises a revised filing." The gavel fell. Case dismissed. Ava returned to her seat, heart steady. Another life spared from a paper noose. That evening, Ava locked up her office and stepped into the cooling air. New York glowed around her, loud, impatient, alive. Her phone buzzed. "Dominic Kane, you free?" She smiled. "Ava, for coffee. Not contracts." A few minutes later, they sat across from each other at a quiet cafe. No security, no entourage. Just 2 people the world had once misjudged. "They're teaching it in law schools now," Dominic said. "The clause." Ava stirred her drink. "Good. Fear works best in the dark." "And you?" he asked. "Any regrets?" She thought of the uniform. The silence. The moment she almost stayed quiet. "No," she said. "Only relief." Dominic nodded. "You changed things." "So did you," she replied. "You listened." They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, a young woman in a maid's uniform passed the window, head down, invisible to the world. Ava watched her go. Then she stood. "I have an early morning," she said. Dominic rose with her. "Saving someone else?" Ava smiled, soft, certain. "Always." She walked into the night, her name no longer something to hide. And somewhere, in contracts yet unwritten, the last clause lost its power. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe to Boundless Echoes for more interesting stories. We really appreciate your support. Comment where you are watching from, so we can give you a shout out. See you in our next video.